Hello and welcome. My name is Maria Macris.
And I'm Tamsin Storin. We're here today to talk about guided reading strategies.
Our purpose today is to engage you in the guided reading framework. We want you to use specific strategies and incorporate them in your teaching routine.
The guided reading framework consists of 5 sections: introducing the text, reading the text, discussing meaning, explicitly teach processing, and writing.
Guided reading is an instructional framework that is structured to make text accessible for all struggling readers. Guided reading helps readers learn how to build systems for processing through teacher-led lessons that show students how to do something with the text.
The first part of the framework is introducing the text. This is where you will activate and or provide background knowledge when you're engaging the students before you read the text.
When you're about to present the text, it's important to show them a visual, get them talking about the text, maybe talk about the illustrations or charts or maps that are within the text, and look at how that particular text is structured. And sometimes we even know if it's nonfiction or fiction just by skimming and making predictions.
The next strategy is using visuals, like she mentioned. This is something great to do with the students and have them engage in discussions about the visuals before even reading the text.
So it's important for you to incorporate some activities where you can have a video or a visual prompt, something that gets the kids talking about what they're about to read. You can add sentence frames, you can add word banks, and also allow them to have discussions about what they see or what they witnessed in a video.
And this is great for bringing in that background knowledge and experiences that they already bring to the table. Another is predict. This is where students can skim the text and predict what they think will happen based on what they saw when they went through really quickly.
That's right. So when you're predicting, you're asking the students to make guesses based on the clues that they see in the story, what they think the story is going to be about. It can be done also in nonfiction texts. You could ask them, what do you think the purpose of this story is, or the purpose of this text is? You can use clues from the author to make that educated guess and encourage students to think about personal experiences and background knowledge so that they can think about what could happen in the story that they're reading.
Exactly. Our next part of the framework is the actual reading of the text. This is really important because you can't understand the text unless you read it, right?
That's right.
And here are some strategies that are involved.
When you read the text, you have to set a purpose for reading. Something that we like to do a lot is called the PAT list. It's a pay attention to list. It could be anything. It could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be a question. It's something to give a purpose for that text prior to reading and during reading.
And it's important that this pay attention to list also links to the skill in which you're trying to teach. So that way, even though you might be reading this text multiple times, this purpose for this time you're reading it is a focus with the pay attention to list.
That's right. So you could actually read a text more than once for different purposes. Another thing that we can do as educators is we can model appropriate intonation and stress while we're reading. We also have to guide the students to think within the text. So that means we have to break apart words and clarify ideas. We have to do a lot of pausing and a lot of thinking and a lot of modeling of thinking. It's a good time also as you're reading the text to also explain vocabulary. So pull up a Google image or have some thought out images that you want to discuss. If there's a map, if there's something in the text that you want to point out, have that ahead of time so that you can have those discussions with students.
So the first one is connect, making connections to the world, to life, experiences. This is a strategy for while they're reading the text.
Yeah, this strategy is really neat because we can encourage students to read something and make connections to their personal lives, find meaning and relevance with that text. You can guide the students to think about themselves, other stories that they've read, or their life.
Yeah, they can even connect it to other subjects.
That's right.
Text masking. This is a great one. This is where you block out parts of the text, but you're not compromising the meaning or the intended purpose of the text.
And this is really good for students that are struggling to read. And if you present a text the first time, You can mask out a few pieces of it so that the student doesn't feel like there's a lot of words that they need to learn. And when you develop this strategy and this skill, students could then learn to point out specific things that they're looking for in the text, and they can read a little faster with a little more fluency.
I mean, as you read here, if we see this example, even though some text was masked and blocked out, it still makes sense. There is real scientific evidence that there was a giant creature that lived in lakes and forests of North America. Still a perfect sentence. Even better is that you're not reducing the lexile or grade level of the text. It's keeping the same rigor that they need to be exposed to.
That's right. There is still some text complexity. The students are exposed to grade level text. And what's really good about this is if you can teach this explicitly, students can learn to do this on their own while they're reading complex texts.
Exactly. It's a great strategy for us to use with them and for them to use themselves.
That's right.
The next one is visualize. This is where we encourage students to paint a picture by using their imagination of what is happening in the story as they're reading.
Yeah, visualization brings stories to life. It allows you to be creative with what you're reading. You ask the student to visualize, close their eyes, think about what picture the author's trying to paint. What is that movie that is playing in your head? It is something we have to also teach them explicitly. And through the guiding reading framework, it helps us incorporate that in our lessons.
Yes, it's very important for us to model that thinking that we're thinking and saying, well, this is what I'm picturing in my head, and kind of pausing and thinking out loud so that it helps them to know what maybe their mind should be creating and thinking while they're reading as well.
Very true.
The next is word work. This is where you use analogies, letter-sound relationships, or word parts to discuss the hidden meaning of words.
One strategy in particular that we also emphasize is using cognates. Cognates are words that are the same in more than one language. They could be the same or very similar spelling and pronunciation. So students that are learning English as a second language can find cognates and probably know a lot more in the text than you thought they did.
And probably more than they thought they did.
Exactly. So that's something we have to teach them to do. Also, we want to encourage you to pause and think during your reading so that we can make those associations with words that the student doesn't know.
Even when there's hidden meaning of words, right? There could be a positive or negative connotation. And if you don't model that for them and that thinking, then they won't know how to start using that strategy on their own.
That's right. So using the positive and negative connotations to also have discussions about words, it could also guide the student to think a little bit about the mood, the tone of the story. So all of those words and all of that discussion is really important during the reading.
And it helps on a lot of skills that they have to learn.
That's right.
The next part of the framework is discussing meaning. This one is going over finding evidence in the text and clarifying misunderstandings while they're reading.
I can't emphasize enough that we need to pause during guided reading. We have to reflect. We have to ask questions. We have to ask students what they think the text is trying to tell us. We should restate, have discussions, guide the students to the topic, the main idea or the central idea, and the details that are associated with it.
And using annotations like you see here are really helpful for students because they might have remembered they saw that word or remembered that part of the text, but now they can't find it and it's taking a while to go find it. By having these simple text annotations, they're able to go back and remember and find what they're used to. And again, it will take some modeling, but they will get it and they will start to use that strategy on their own.
Yeah, the cool thing about guided reading is you do it with the student. So as you highlight, the student highlights. As you mark the text, the student marks the text. And these are all explicitly taught so that students could do it on their own someday.
And it's a discussion. You discuss with them, why am I highlighting? Why am I doing these things? So that they understand the meaning behind it.
That's right. And also summarize. Provide opportunities for summarization and give them a chance to make connections and to discuss with their partners or students in the class their ideas about what they're reading.
So one strategy we have for discussing meaning is to clarify. This is where you stop and pause and ask questions. Make sure the reader really gets what's going on in that text.
So during the reading process, and it's not an independent task, take time to look up words in the dictionary, use word-to-word glossaries and dictionaries for our L's, reread confusing parts, And also, it's important you're grouping in class. Think about how students can be grouped together to work together and to help each other.
Yeah, sometimes some people will read one thing and get something out of it that someone did not quite catch, and that is very helpful to have them have those discussions.
Yeah. Looking at pictures and captions, point those out while you're reading because they also give valuable information to the text.
Next part is identifying central ideas. These are the main point or points that an author makes about a topic or even a secret that might be hiding, underlying in the story.
Yeah, tell the students to look at the hidden meaning. Authors always write something for a reason, and sometimes we just need to point that out and guide the students to look for that hidden meaning. Look for the most important parts, the heart of the story, what the story is all about. If it's a fictional piece, ask them to look for clues with the characters, the setting, the events that are happening throughout the story. To ask them to look for anything that you feel is your routine. Use a specific routine for your classroom setting, but always use it consistently because as they learn how to find those central ideas, it will help them find more meaning in the text.
Here's a great example of an anchor chart that you could use that has, was it 5 steps that they can go through that works them towards coming up with that central idea, something that is explicit and goes through step by step that they can follow is really super helpful.
Exactly. So whatever routine you decide to use, stick with it or find one that really works and keep teaching them that central idea in any text that you read.
And the last part of this section of the framework is questioning. This is where you practice active reading by asking questions while you are reading.
Yeah, let's ask questions about characters' motivations, the plot twist, the author's purpose. Get a deeper understanding and curiosity for why this text was written. Ask those questions during reading, but also model yourself that self-questioning. I wonder,
Yeah.
I wonder. And have those discussions with your students.
Awesome. And this part of the framework is explicitly teach processing. This is where we talked about reading the text more than once and for different purposes.
Yes, you may want to read the text first and use all of those strategies while reading the text the first time and just look for the central idea of that text. But then you might want to read it again and then you want the student to make a summary or maybe you want them to do something else with the text. So have that in mind that while you're doing that, you have to explicitly teach the processing.
It's really important too because students who might be struggling with reading, now they don't have to read a whole new text with new words that they don't understand, but they can read that same text but for a different purpose.
Yeah. And if they forgot those words, you can again solve those words for them.
Mm-hmm.
Pause, check for understanding, search for information. And what is really cool about this is the think aloud component. You can narrate to your students how it is that you solved that idea or you solved that question.
Well, the first strategy is using clues to discover hidden meanings in the text, such as using an inference.
Yeah, we know that ideas are either implied or they're explicit. So with those ideas that are implied, there's a lot more mental work that has to happen. You have to look for clues, you have to make connections, you have to piece everything together and find out what is that hidden meaning or that implied idea in that particular text.
Yeah, I always remember The Boy Who Cried Wolf. There was a hidden meaning in that story that it was very important for me to get, and I was told it many times.
I hope that students find similar meaning to other stories that we're presenting to them in class. But always guide your students through all that process.
And then we have evaluate. This is where they discover new perspectives, they can use their critical thinking.
When we evaluate, that's higher level and higher order thinking, right? So a lot of things have to happen before that. You have to guide your students to form opinions, to form judgments. You have to model that thinking, narrate that thinking. You can talk about the characters, what is the theme, what is that implied idea that's in there, and explore different perspectives.
Right, and even if you maybe have your own opinion and maybe you see this viewpoint, you can ask students to say, okay, I want you to pretend you had a different viewpoint and try to come up with like good reasons why that author made that viewpoint, even if you didn't agree, to really help them understand the purpose.
Tamsin, you bring up a very good point. Whatever the perspective is, let's back it up with the evidence from the text and have those discussions in class and use these particular strategies to benefit the students.
All right. And the last part of our framework is writing. It's very important for students to use writing, drawing, even if they're not, down at that ability, to expand their understanding of the text and really solidify everything that we've done up until this point.
Yes, that is so true. Writing is an essential part of reading. And we have to give them an opportunity to write. And sometimes we have a lot of struggling writers in our classroom. And therefore, I recommend that we do a shared writing activity where I'm writing and they're writing. Modeling that writing process. Yeah, provide the students opportunities to expand their writing using more complex strategies and more complex structures in their writing. Also, to develop and organize their thoughts. You can use things like comic strips or drawings and pair that with writing. You could also use graphic organizers and sentence and paragraph frames for longer writing assignments, especially for those students that are struggling with writing.
And you find over time, as they use these paragraph starters or paragraph frames, they start to not need them, and they might be there, but you'll see they get so used to them, they start to change them up a little bit and make them their own because they're starting to understand how the writing is supposed to be structured.
That's right. Just like I always say, we need to give them the tools so that they can be successful and get the confidence in reading and writing.
Yes. And another strategy for writing is summarizing, which is capturing or highlighting in just a few words, sometimes sentences, sometimes paragraphs, everything that you had read about in that particular text.
Yeah, summarizing is a quick recap of everything in all of the most important parts of the text. Students remember those central ideas, those main ideas, the key events, and they put it all together in an organized manner. And it could also bring you to talk about the theme and what is the purpose of this particular text.
And it's great to use an anchor chart as well. Again, something that is visual that can help them with the steps so that they're supported in that process.
Thank you all for watching this recording. We talked about some strategies you can use while introducing the text,
reading the text,
discussing meaning,
explicitly teach processing,
and writing.
Yep.
So we thank you for watching. And again, my name is Maria Macris.
And I'm Tamsin Storin.
And we work for the Multicultural Department. We thank you, and we hope that you found some strategies you can use in your classroom routine.